Welcome to this third talk held under the heading Digital Debates. Welcome whether you're watching this live here in this Zoom room or on YouTube, or if you're tuning in later. Debates on Europe is a series of events organized by two German institutions, namely the S. Fischer Stiftung in Berlin and die Deutsche Akademie für Sprache und Dichtung based in Darmstadt. Ever since the first event of Debates on Europe was held in Budapest in 2012, this series has been hosted in places where something is at stake, where the future is being negotiated in one way or the other, politically, socially, or culturally. From Minsk and Kharkiv in the east, to Belfast in the west, from St. Petersburg and Narva in the north to Skopje or Athens in the south. These events have addressed the most pressing issues on the European agenda. This virus-ridden year, 2020, this endeavor has moved into the digital sphere under the title Debates Digital. Here in this space, some of the writers, scholars, and public intellectuals in the Debates on Europe network have given insight into parts of Europe otherwise underexposed or in the media shadow in the international media. In text and talks, we have discussed how the failures of politicians and governments in response to the COVID-19 crisis have paved a way for allegiances to shift and for political change in the positive sense, for example, in Northern Ireland or in Belarus. But we have also seen how authoritarian politicians in Hungary or in Serbia have used the health crisis in order to limit political freedom and further their own versions of a liberal democracy. Today, we will again move around the topic of change, but also about continuity, social and personal continuity. With me tonight, not from Moscow, but from Potsdam in Germany, is the Russian novelist Sergei Lebedev, whose books have been translated into over 15 languages. His new book, Untraceable, will be out in English next spring. His novels are all dedicated to the theme of the Soviet hidden past, the impact of Stalin's repressions and its consequences in today's modern Russia. And this interpretive matrix is also the one that he applied when writing the article for this digital debate article in this digital debate series, and we'll come to that in a minute. And I'm not sure, but I don't think from Vilnius, but from a village a little bit outside, some 50 kilometers or so from Vilnius. We're joined by Lithuanian writer and film director Marius Ivaškevičius. He is one of Lithuania's most performed playwrights, and his plays have been staged in Russia, in Germany, in Italy, in France, in New Zealand, to mention just a few places. When the virus hit a few months ago, theaters, I think no less than 13 theaters where Marius' plays were either played or were about to be played were shut down. Let me start by asking you, Marius. Not so long ago, your daughter came home from New York and you put yourself into self-isolation with her in this house, in this village. Are you still in quarantine?
No, pity, but not. It's over, and but yeah, kind of, because my daughter, like now in Vilnius, and today we have this midsummer day. I don't know. It's quite. It's really big celebration in our Baltic countries. So she's going to do it there with her friends. But I'm here, thanks to you, thanks to the debates. I'm in my small town, which called Molėtai, and yeah, and I'm happy.
Yeah, you're happy, and we'll come to that happiness a bit later, about the ambivalence between what is open and what is secluded, and what is sedentary and what is moving. Sergei, when you're now in Potsdam,
yeah,
but when this whole pandemic hit, and also hit Russia, you were sitting doing research in an archive in Moscow.
Yeah.
And suddenly felt as if two times were connected. Could you tell us about this experience?
Yes, I was in the archive of the Federal Security Service of Russia, which contains the personal files of those who were repressed under Stalin. I was reading and I was tracing of how the human relationship in the past were breaking, of how these chains of friendship, humanity, or whatsoever were dissolving just because somebody became under suspicion. Somebody became like infected. And at the same time, just day by day, the news about virus were spreading, and you felt that what you are reading is a perfect metaphor for what is going on in the society. Because society, I mean Russian society, quickly went from initial non-recognition, virus will never come to Russia or whatsoever, to this storm of, let's say, suspicion, storm of looking that possibly the other is this dangerous person.
Yeah, and who are these dangerous persons? You have family in Moscow right now, right?
Yes, my father is in Moscow. He's 79. He is, how to say, he is the person whom the state tries to protect, because he's old, his health is not in a good condition, but the means with which he's protected actually resembles the worst traditions of the Soviet rule, actually, because now all the restrictions are lifted, but for 2 months he lived with all his electronic passes blocked. He wasn't able to go like more than 100 meters from his apartment. The worst problem was that he never used a smartphone, and all this, let's say, governmental control stuff is related to the smartphone. So he was living illegal life without the possession of this of the smartphone. And so more or less it was feeling like you are living in the occupied country.
But you say that the one way of surveying and coming to terms with the crisis is via digital means. At the same time, there are so many flaws that has happened in this attempt to deal with the crisis in Russia. For some of them are also related to these digital means or attempts. For example, when the whole of the city is trying to get to the subway with these electronic passes.
Yeah, but I mean, of course, the implementation is quite in the Russian style, and it's a sort of disorder which pretends to be order. It was the very serious and dangerous moment, actually, because with the Moscow, like 16 or 17 million inhabitants, the whole city depends on subway crucially. And once upon a time, it was issued an order, which is not a law, and which, let's say, legal nature is very questionable, that since the next day everybody should possess the special permit in their smartphones. And then, of course, the next morning, the police was standing and blocking all the entrances to the suburb, to the underground, and manually, not digitally, manually checking all this stuff. It was the perfect place to COVID to spread itself. It was a state crime, but actually it went unpunished and even not recognized.
Today is, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, because I didn't have time to check the news now, but today is another event that has a potential, at least watched from the outside, to be such an event that could boost the virus. Because today, on the Red Square, the big...
It will be tomorrow.
It will be tomorrow.
It will be tomorrow. Yeah.
Of course, okay.
June,
But tomorrow,
June 24th.
It's on Wednesday. Yeah. So the big parade that was supposed to be on the 9th of May, that I think Lukashenko in Belarus was the only one who actually to go through with it. This is being held tomorrow instead. What is that? What attempt is that of Putin to go through with that parade?
Actually, there were two major events which were planned for the spring, closely interconnected, I would say. For April, for the late days of April, there were planned voting for the changes in the constitution, in the Russian constitution. There are a lot of changes, but it's a smokescreen. One change is important, which enlarges the Putin's capacity to stay in power for 2 more terms, and let's say for eternity. And after this election, it was the parade of victory, like the people's will to celebrate all this stuff. In March, our government tried to pretend that it will all work. Corona will not hit because we are not these rotten Europeans. We have natural health. We have even some vaccina, which was used in Soviet times for the children, which still protects us, blah, 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 blah. Of course, then it never worked. They were forced to postpone all these 2 events. And now we have only a restaging of these 2 major compositions. And actually, Corona gave Putin a very, very great chance, because the voting will be held in a very strange semi-digital way. And even by the Russian standards, which are very low, it will be not possible to trace the fraud and so on and so on. Yeah, so they simply changed the order. Now the parade goes first, as it was in June 1945, and then July 1st, very quickly, the famous and victorious elections.
Mm-hmm. But your analysis of this, though, is a bit different from most that I have read, actually, because you are also in the article that you published in this series, putting a question mark behind the sentence, will this actually long-term hurt the ratings and the popularity and the plans of Vladimir Putin? The other analysts are saying the COVID-19 crisis came after the oil price crisis, and now there's real potential for protest in Russia that it hasn't been before. Your analysis is a different one.
I would say that all the rule of Vladimir Putin is the chain of events which had a very huge potential to crash his rule. He started from the sinking of Kursk submarine. He proceeded with the hostage taking in Beslan and disastrous storming. I mean, any of these things were potential threat and so on. But somehow he managed not only to survive through this, but to enlarge his capacities, but to install more authoritarian rule. For example, the direct outcome of the Beslan was the abolishing of the regional governors' elections in Russia. And just in this September 2004, everybody was saying that, I mean, you cannot just survive through this. You have these 300 children who die. It's the whole school. But a year after, he was okay. And I would say that he's a perfect manager of fear. He's a perfect manager of fear. He doesn't know any other human feelings, but he knows something about fear. He raised himself out of the fear in 1999 with the outcome of the Second Chechen War, and he will, unfortunately, he will exploit the huge amount of fear which is produced by COVID, and he will exploit it to his own to enlarge his own power, I would say.
Yeah. So this brings us in actually to the issue of mentality, which is a problematic concept. It's really a problematic concept, but still, you're thinking, when you're sitting there in this archive, looking into the crimes of the past and making the connection between the political contagion that was then the case and the contagion which is now, and the fear that both of them, that connects both of them. You're saying that this type of psychological reaction is something that has been inherited through the generations and is still characteristic of Russian society, and which is what profoundly then makes change less likely. What is that mentality? Is it would you describe it as a Soviet mentality?
Okay, let's try to be short, but on one hand, you have the government which treats the citizens not as the patients, not as the people who are open to dangerous disease, but as those suspicious persons who can spread the virus. But on the other hand, the citizens themselves, I mean, maybe not the middle class of Moscow, but the citizens themselves in the cities near Moscow, in the Russian cities, they don't feel the value of their own lives. And they behave, I would say, absolutely irresponsible. They feel that the government, for some unreasonable reasons, are pressing them into this strange thing which is called quarantine. But it's very childish, I would say, behavior. But the base of this is the feeling that your life doesn't count. It has no inner value even for yourself. You are not focused on protecting yourself, you're focused on on being free in terms of doing whatsoever you would like to do. And this is a very strange connection. This is the core of the problem, because they are, I mean, the governmental structures and let's say people's will, they are producing, in summary, the very strange construction.
Marius, at the beginning of the quarantine, of the isolation, you had that feeling as well. You describe it very eloquently in your article, how you're forced to do something that you don't want to, that this is a measure imposed on you from the outside, that goes against everything that you believe in: openness, travel, being connected, and so on. But then something happens.
Yeah, I think I found this little slave inside of me, which always was there, but it was pushed somewhere deep. And I think now maybe it's really no psychological thing that when you are limited somehow in your possibilities, you starting to find pluses and happiness in this new circumstances. And of course, for me, I'm a writer, so it means that I'm a person that must sit for hours, for days, for weeks, for months, even years, if he wants to do something, to finish something. And in last years, life was like that all the time, like you are sitting 1 week and 2 weeks you are traveling with different tasks. And this was like putting you back to your place, this quarantine where you must be. So for me, as for writer, it was really quite happy and productive time. But of course, now it's different if you think it's forever, or if you think it's for 2 or 3 months. So if I would understand that it's forever, maybe I would have different opinion about that. But no, I mean, it's good in this time that we were limited only in our movement, but not in our freedom of speech, freedom of all the others freedoms. And then it didn't I didn't have real conflict inside of me.
Because Sergei is using the virus as a metaphor for talking about society, and you also introduce a metaphoric scene in your article when you're flipping through the sides of an old Soviet map or an atlas.
Yeah.
Remembering the seclusion that was then not temporary at all, but it was the fact of life, that certain things were so to say not within your reach, and also combined with limits to freedom of speech. But you describe also how you, for example, how your political engagement is put on hold. Things are happening in society that you normally would have risen up to and shouted or written an article to protest against, but you don't do that now. And is this you, or is this Lithuanian society?
I mean, yeah, it was maybe another me. It was lazy for some political reaction, and concentrated on my literature works. But I think it's over now. I'm becoming again quite political, and because I think we are really quite boring country in context of the coronavirus, because now every day we have no more than 3 new corona
cases of infection.
Cases. So sorry, for almost 4 months I didn't talk English, so I forgot. And it's really everything opened already. Even people don't need to wear masks anymore. The only the big events like theaters, concerts are still with the question. I mean, now it's summer for theater, but we don't know how it will be in autumn. But what I see that this corona, this quarantine made us even more provincial than we were before that. Because, for example, just a few weeks ago, we had the protest in Vilnius, Black Lives Matter protest. About 1,000 young people went to the streets, and the reaction was reaction from the I know from the media, from the some influencers was so strange that, no, what are you doing? Why you react to something that happens there in United States? It's not your business. React to your small. There was people, some people with transparents, fuck the police. So, and they started to say, fuck the police, yes. And a week ago, there was, in Lithuania was killed policeman, by some criminals. So you want fuck the police, yes. And even police after that started, investigation about this transparents, and for those people who had them, they I don't know what they're going to do with them, but yeah. And then another thing, for example, now in Belarus are now protests against Lukashenko, against the regime, and in our media is just silence. There is no Belarus around us. There is nothing around us. Just only us. And this thing, makes me a bit. Yeah, I mean the only thing, that we the only maybe thing that now we have a common Baltic states like bubble they are calling. So you can go by car, by plane, like freely. That's our area, and everything else is now another world, infected world, still infected world, because we have, on one hand, we have Belarus, and on the other hand, we have Sweden, which never, tried to, fight with the corona, or was fighting in different ways. So it's better to stay in this small, our bubble of 3 Baltic countries.
But wasn't that one of the main reasons why you were before such an ardent defender of the openness, and as in order to make the world greater than what the confinements behind the national borders would suggest that it is?
You mean what? You mean
that this kind of inward looking, which I don't think, by the way, is by any means restricted to Lithuania. I think that most countries, including the big ones, the big Leitkulturen like Germany or France or whatever, have become provincial, inward looking during this this crisis. And this is also why I want to read your article as an allegory, as describing not a writer in a Lithuanian village which is becoming more productive than he was before, and but is still having this dichotomy, fighting this dichotomy within him, but as a very telling picture of the situation in which Europe is at the moment. Would I overstretch your article by doing that, you think?
No, exactly. Yeah, it is a metaphor. It is an allegory, and and also it's we never had experience of this pandemic. I mean, it's new for all of us. And in the beginning, it seemed that it's something that will unite world. It's something that will rise our empathy, first to Chinese, then to Italians. And then it was so strange, that my daughter, when she was still in New York, and New York became really the top of COVID-19, the top of pandemia, she was writing me. So it's so strange that everybody was talking about Italians, but now nobody talking about New York. Like, why we are. And I told to her, people becoming tired to be empathic. You have strength for one empathy, but not for not for many. Like also like war. First months to next month, first half of a year, war is in topic of the all media of the world, and then just people forget it because they need new news. And yeah, and then I realized, so and I missed this bigger empathy to each other, especially between Europeans, because I still think, that maybe it wasn't the only way, to close everybody in our small countries, like letting Italians to die, but to survive for ourselves. I mean, it's really strange that I hear from my colleagues from Germany that European Union really did very much during this pandemic, but in our consciousness it's zero. It's just disappeared. We all now living in our national countries, and European Union just some mirage, something maybe will come back, but not soon, and nobody knows when.
Sergei?
Yes, I would just add something. I was also impressed of how easy the borders were reinstalled. I mean, not only in terms of the technical measures, but in terms of the mindset of the people. I'm living here just 1 kilometer from the former Berlin Wall, and I'm used to jogging or biking.
Wall was rebuilt during the pandemic? Wall was rebuilt?
I mean, it wasn't rebuilt, Marius, but the former exclusion zone was again absolutely empty, first time for 30 years. And you feel how easy it's to reinstall this. I was leaving Moscow on one of the last planes coming from Russia, and the airports were absolutely empty. The border controls were shut down, and you suddenly felt how fragile is all our contacts, is all our trust and belief to each other. It all is hooked to the very, very fragile things. And this decisiveness in shutting down the borders and closing and protecting is something maybe absolutely pragmatic, crucial and important, but at the same time, it's something against the spirit of United Europe, I would say, as I can feel it as an outsider.
Yeah, but as Marius describes it very well, because both these souls are living within the European Union, not to speak about larger Europe. The national soul and the strive towards, which is not special to Europe, of course, because rallying around the flag is something you see in most countries around the world. New Zealand is a positive example for us, but it's exactly the same thing: seclusion, and it's an island, so it's quite easy to do it, and it has become a positive example. But it's also at the center of that is the flag and the rallying around that, and then you have the openness, which the European Union was, as the diversity and the cooperation and all that. And the question is, I'm really happy to see now, Marius, that you're already kind of getting out of that seclusion and the sedentary mood and start to do things, because that is the question. How will the European Union go out of that and find back to a spirit of cooperation? Because you have here the fights of the future. You have between a globally connected economic system and the need to be supporting yourself with medication, protective gear, food, things like that. You have basically what is standing against each other is the open and the closed society. What is your educated guess, Marius, about the future?
You're totally right. We have, we all Europeans or citizens of European Union, we have two souls, as you said, yeah, our national soul and our common European soul. And in this sphere, situation, it looked that national soul was stronger, much stronger than our European soul. And I think probably we thought that this common Europe is really close now. It looks like much far away, and we need still 1 or 2 generations that people would when they need to close from enemy like Corona or another enemy, they will close not their national borders, but like this big borders of European Union. But I think this society, at least Eastern European society, is not still ready for that. We are too fresh in European Union. We are just here still only 16 years, so it's probably too little time to get this common feeling.
And as an outsider inside, Sergei, what is your speculation about the future?
I don't know. I would say that for my home country, it will be the long way out. And maybe some things which were installed, like all these people tracking devices and so on, they will stay in use, let's say. What was quite surprising for me during the initial stage, that actually the state propaganda described the situation like the virus came to Russia from Europe. I mean, we cannot trust the data at all. Officially now we have more than 500,000 of those who were infected and so on. The same people who tracked the election fraud with the means of math and statistics, they track this data also. It cannot be trusted. We don't know really how many people got the COVID in Russia. Probably much more than this official 500,000. But I started from with this model that it's all came from the West. It's all sort of the infection which came from the West. And I think that as every natural or historical disaster, this thing will hold a long-lasting impact on the Russian society, because we accepted all these drastic and I would say even draconian measures with quite an ease, without any will or possibility to resist. Mm-hmm. And this tells to government, to Putin, that he can go further. He can go further. And I think he will use this opportunity. And what to European Union, I hope it will recover soon. And the first flights are taking from Schönefeld. I see them every day and every night, which is most important. The sky is not empty again, and I would say that it will be. I think that European Union passed through this exam with dignity. It's most important, with dignity.
I would like to get back to the geopolitical discussion in a second. I will just remind everyone who's watching live that you can ask questions, and the easiest way to do that is to write in the commentary field or in the Q&A if you're in the Zoom room. So please ask your questions and I will try to build them into the discussion. But I would like to get back to the geopolitical discussion, and with a bit of a Russian angle, at least to start with. Not very recently, Vladimir Putin wrote an article in the conservative American journal, The National Interest, where he describes a view of history, which is also fleeting into this constitutional referendum, actually, which says that it should be illegal to question the historical truth. And he's making some rather astonishing statements and interpretations of what that historical truth actually is. You are Sergei, almost all your novels, or all your novels, are about that historical past in one way or the other. Have you read the article in the National Interest? And
Yes.
what's your interpretation?
Yes, I did it.
What is your interpretation of it?
It's shameful. It's shameful. I mean, of course, it's not just an article. It's sort of a statement. I don't think that Vladimir Putin is serious in idea to rebuild the Soviet Union as it was. I mean, including all the former occupied republics. But he's clearly serious to intimidate all the former members of the Soviet Union and to get from them what he wants with this means of intimidation. Because one phrase in this article is particularly clear, that some of the republics who entered the Soviet Union peacefully were much smaller in the beginning, but they went out being much bigger. They got some, as he put it, some gifts from the Russian people. And it's, from his point of view, it's not good at all. You should put your gifts back to the owner when you are going back. I mean, this opens the enormous space for the speculations, for the for the blackmailing, and so on and so on. And of course, again, we are coming to this parade of June 24th. The only real moral capital which now Russia possesses derives from the Second World War, from the fact of victory in the Second World War. It's the only real or surreal capital which marks good and evil in this mindset, worldview of Putin and his henchmen. And because of that, I would rather be alarmed, especially when you are living in one of the former Soviet occupied countries.
Yeah, this is where I wanted to get. For those of you who haven't read the article, it's trying to do a lot of things, I think, most of all saying that the West is not appreciating enough what the Soviet Union did back in World War II, but it's also making historical interpretations of very specific events, like, for example, the Munich Agreement, like being the first big crime of the West. So the West are the culprits who actually started the Second World War. That's at least an interpretation. And it's relativizing the Stalin-Hitler Pact by saying that every Western state also had secret agreements in this. But it also says something about the Baltic countries and the Baltic states. And he's writing more or less literally that the incorporation of the Baltic states into the Soviet Union was done on a voluntary basis.
By legal means.
And by legal means, and it was agreed upon by elected representatives. So my question goes to you, Marius. Do you feel comfortable in the European Union with the big neighbor to the east, or are you worried?
I just want to add to this because this article, Putin's article, was reactions to Lithuanian Europarlamentarians' initiative in the Euro Parliament, to more or less make equality between Nazis' crimes and the Soviet crimes. That it was two monsters, and it made him crazy, then he promised that he will write his historical article. So finally he did it. But I don't think that we must react to that somehow. We are alarmed enough about Russia, and I don't think that we need bigger alarm here, because last 6 years we really lived in kind of pre-war feeling. I mean, after the Crimea occupation, after the Donbas war, people in Lithuania and authorities in Lithuania started to talk that next will be Lithuania. Latvians said that next will be Latvia, and every country had their reasons why they could be the next. So I just think we are enough alarmed, and it not really help to live this fear all the time. And sometimes better just don't react to those dictators' words. I mean, I think they firstly they speak for their own audience, for the Russians. It's addressed there, and I don't think that Putin is so crazy, that he would start war with the NATO. And I still believe, that he has some clever mind. Even there was a good joke about this quarantine. It was joke somewhere in internet that so you just you spend only 2 months in the quarantine, and imagine the person who spent 20 years in quarantine, and he don't know what is going around. He don't see people. It was about Vladimir Putin, of course. So I don't think that we need to somehow alarm more than before.
Sergei?
Okay, but what I see, also the third major event of this spring and summer in Russia is the introduction of the main temple of the Russian armed forces, built in the park, newly established park, which is called Patriot. So it's the main temple of all the officers and the soldiers of the Russian army. If you didn't saw this architectural chef-d'oeuvre, you should definitely see it, because it comes directly from the Lord of the Rings. It's a dark, devilish, enormous building where you can see Stalin, all the Russian great warriors, and so on. When you see just from behind, I mean, normal people just cannot build such a thing. They are all crazy. I mean, if you have a little bit of the taste or ideas how temple could look like, you simply will not build it. And the fact that they build this, it's black-green. It's black-green, it's hockey. It's the temple in the hockey colors. And the fact that all the presidential staff and president himself, they went there to open the thing. They are militarizing the society. They are clearly militarizing the society, and they've gone too far. They simply don't see what is real and what is surreal. I mean, maybe it's not as dangerous, I mean, in terms of the real militaristic aggression. But of course, if they will see the slightest weakness, as it happened with Ukraine in 2014, they will act.
Yeah, but I think now on the way is Belarus, where I mean, which is really now this year's is fighting or even not fighting for to be or not to be Belarus, or just become, part of Russian Empire. So I think there will be, or already goes the main Putin's battle, to take this former republic back to the Putin's USSR, or how to call it. So I mean, and I really worry about that, because I'm half Belarusian, and it's not for me, this country is not just empty place, and and I think still, and it's a very complicated situation, because on one hand we have dictator who now becoming kind of the stone of independence, or he becoming to present him like that, and you even cannot. It's dangerous to push him out, because now then, like, the danger is that Belarus just straightly goes to the Putin hands. So yeah, but here I think is the land where Europe could put more their focus, and their
But Marius, is there a Belarusian Lithuanian solidarity connection, also because of the Grand Lithuanian or the Lithuanian Grand Duchy? There are historical connections between these countries, not only the post-Soviet ones, so to say, or the Soviet common past. Are there among artists, among intellectuals, but also politically, are there solidarity connections?
No, and I think it's what was done during not only Soviet time, but during Russian Empire, where we incorporated or occupied by Russia in the end of 18th century. It was something cut from our brains, that before that we were one nation, not just one country. We were one political nation, and now we have the same history. But we kind of, instead of being somehow together or at least solidar, we are trying to conquer each other, which king belongs to them or to us, and that Lithuanian historic saying that those Belarusian nationalists, they want to take all our history and to make Lithuania there, and we will be like small Lithuania, they will be great Lithuania. And no, there is no solidarity, there is no even normal exchange, cultural exchange. The only exchange is that people from Belarus are coming to our malls in Vilnius, buy things here. They like Vilnius old town, but it's the only thing that maybe it's common for Lithuanians. Minsk is the nearest big capital, but ask how many of them there were in last 10 or 20 years. There will be just maybe 1% or even less. So it's like that this country, this side doesn't exist. East doesn't exist for us. Like everything is in the West.
But are there no movements within any political party to promote the cause of Belarus within the European Union? You've seen that in many cases. Now Belarus is not a membership candidate. This is clear. But Sweden, for example, took upon itself to argue for including the Baltic states in the European Union and became an advocate. You have similar things happening in the Western Balkans right now. Is there no such ambition or no such tendencies in Lithuania?
No, I think it's a problem that who you can advocate. Lukashenko, the dictator, I mean, it's not the same that Sweden had in the case of Baltic states. And now we have another big issue. It's a nuclear station, which Lukashenko is building just 50 kilometers from Vilnius, and building, with huge нарушениями. Sergei?
With huge faults and
Fault and everything,
Yeah.
and for us, like we all are traumatized by Chernobyl, and this is like we all understand it's end of Lithuanian nation if if it will explore one day. I mean, it's end for Vilnius and for what is rest. So this is now the main issue: how to stop it, or at least maybe not to stop the whole this station, but maybe some reactors that it would be not 4 but 1 or 2. I mean, there is no real opposition that we could support. There is no real people with whom to talk. That maybe, or maybe there are, but they are not enough visible. And yeah.
Sergei, do you share Marius' view on the Russian Belarusian threat, or of Belarus being incorporated in Russia?
Of course, in Russian internet already appeared the pictures of the Belarusian Soviet Republic in its initial form, which is much smaller, without eastern parts. Since I think 1922 and 27, the USSR was established until the outbreak of the World War II, it was much smaller. And these pictures already
without Western signs.
Yeah, without Eastern, without Orsha, Gomel, and so on. Yeah, I mean, I'm talking about the maps which are circulating widely already. So it looks like that this hint about the republics who got some prizes from the central government, it hints on Belarus. I think it will be not as easy to provoke the massive feeling that Belarusians are the enemies. It was easy with Ukrainians. It was much easier with Ukrainians because Ukrainians already tried to split the histories and to establish their own narration of history with their own heroes and so on. So it was easier to accuse them with the betrayal and so on. I don't feel the ground to accuse Belarusians of betraying the mutual cause, but I think that they will try to find some sort of this ground, or maybe to try to get rid of Lukashenko personally. But I wouldn't go further in these predictions because I'm not a trained political analyst, and what I feel that it's possible, but maybe not unavoidable.
In this series, we've mixed writers, novelists, playwrights like you with scholars and political analysts, and I've forced you both into a little bit of the geopolitical speculation corner, because I know that you're both also engaged public intellectuals, and which is at times not easy to separate. But we're running out of time now, but before we end, I would ask you though about your current artistic projects. I know, Marius, that you have spent some of this time in quarantine to write fiercely on a novel. What is it about?
I have prejudice not to talk about novel which is not finished, but okay, I can say in few words. It's I'm happy because it was about the writer, my age writer, that living for 13 years in self-isolation, or kind of self-isolation in artist residences, and now he just feels now that it's the end, and he must its residences became kind of, it's a future, and this residence became kind of a zoo, when ordinary people comes, pay money to see artists, how they how they behave, how they, and so he wants to go to the freedom, and yeah, that's for me, the quarantine was just perfect.
We will soon let you out of this zoo when we've looked into your workshop there, and you will have your freedom. But Sergei, what are you working on now?
I also finished the novel. I mean, it's an easy prediction, yes, and I share this the same experience that the top of the, let's say, ordinary activities just allowed me to work and to write day by day. I finished a new novel. I also don't want to talk much more what is it about, but
just you finished, Sergei. You finished.
Yes, I finished. No, I have my own prejudices, but just one hint. Not far away from the place where I'm living, it's the museum of the Wannsee conference, the place where the final solution was documented. And for months or more than a month, first time in my life, I saw it absolutely empty and closed. And I start to think, what is happening in this empty building, which is empty first time in 30 or 40 or something years. I thought about this time interruption as about the time when the supernatural is looking into this emptiness of the daily life, as the moment when you can trace and picture something which is invisible when everybody's on the streets, as a time for hosts and spirits to appear. And this novel will be about this.
We know some of those ghosts and spirits from your previous novels, actually. I look very much forward to reading that. Thank you so much for this talk. This will be, at least preliminary, the last one in this first part of this series. We are thinking now of how to continue, and there are several possible ways. Thank you, Sergei. Thank you, Marius, for taking part in the Digital Debates series.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I think